So, there I was, just trying to get my shoes off at my aunt's place when she corners me to gossip about my job. And let me tell you, the whole evening was a disaster waiting to happen. My cousin's fiancé, with that smug look of his, casually drops that I couldn't even get past security at his dream job. That's when I snapped. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and said, "I'm the CEO. See you Monday." You're going to want to hear how this plays out. Trust me. Make sure you're subscribed, and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Now, here's where it gets interesting. I sat in my car, staring at the brightly lit front door of Aunt Susan's house, the music and laughter from inside reaching my ears like an invitation I wasn't sure I was ready for. It was supposed to be a celebration, right? My cousin Chloe's engagement party, but instead of feeling the usual warmth of family, a heavy weariness settled over me. The last 3 months had been a whirlwind. Conference rooms, transatlantic flights, and so much caffeine that I was practically vibrating. And now, after wrapping up the biggest merger of my career, the board had officially named me CEO of Nexus Core Analytics. It was a huge achievement, huge for anyone, but especially huge for me. I was 41, finally at the top of my game, and yet I had told absolutely no one in my family. No one knew. Not because I was ashamed, but because the transition had been brutal. It was all confidential, high stakes, and I was under a level of pressure I hadn't experienced since I first started my small data firm over a decade ago. It was work, and then more work. 80-hour weeks, missed birthdays, missed calls. My phone buzzed from the passenger seat, a text from Aunt Susan. "Are you here? I see a car." I sighed, killed the engine, and grabbed the ridiculously expensive bottle of champagne from the passenger seat. A peace offering. I wasn't looking forward to walking in there and facing the noise and chaos, but I knew it would be worse if I didn't show up at all. As I walked up the pathway to the front door, the sounds of the party grew louder. I could hear Chloe's voice, laughter, and the faint thrum of upbeat music, all mixing together. The door swung open, and there she was. Chloe, phone in hand, already filming. "She's here, Amelia. You made it," she chirped. "We thought you'd fallen off the earth." I forced a smile as I stepped inside, trying to keep the anxiety at bay. "Hi, Chloe. Congratulations," I said. The words felt hollow. Shoes off, she called, pointing at a pile of footwear by the door. I was still balancing on one foot, trying to untie my boot, when Aunt Susan appeared out of nowhere. She didn't greet me with a hug, didn't even say hello. She simply leaned in, close enough that her voice felt like a whisper in my ear, though it was louder than the music. "Amelia, darling," that she said, "so glad you could come. Now listen, maybe don't bring up your, job situation tonight. It'll just depress the kids. It's a party, after all." I froze, one boot half off. My back ached from the awkward posture. I slowly stood up, trying to process her words. "My job situation," I repeated, a little thrown. Aunt Susan patted my arm, a smile plastered on her face, but her eyes flickered nervously around the hall. "It's nothing to be ashamed of, dear," she continued, her voice a little too sympathetic. "These tech layoffs are just awful. I'm sure you'll land on your feet. You're a smart girl. Maybe you just aimed a little too high." I stared at her, feeling the weight of the champagne bottle in my hand like it was made of lead. They thought I'd been fired the last few months, the 80-hour weeks, the merger, the CEO title. They thought I was unemployed? "Oh," was all I managed to say. That was the only word that came out. Aunt Susan patted my arm again, not really seeing me, her eyes already darting to the next guest. "Now come on, sweetie," she urged, practically pulling me by the elbow. "Go get a drink. Have some fun. Chloe is just thrilled about her new ring." I forced a smile, tight and brittle, as I placed my boots neatly by the door and made my way to the living room. I took a seat on the edge of the couch, a ghost at my own family's celebration. The weight of Aunt Susan's assumption hit me harder than I'd expected. They had decided for me. They had written their own narrative about my life. They thought I was a failure. And the worst part? They were kind of enjoying it. I could feel their eyes on me, pitying me as I nursed a club soda, the bubbles fizzling in the glass. Around me, the party swirled. Chloe, always the center of attention, was holding court by the fireplace. Her friends were gathered around her, cameras in hand, all capturing the moment she flashed her new diamond ring. She wasn't just excited she was performing, the whole thing was for the camera, for the gram, for the world to see. Brand strategist, she called herself, though it seemed more like being a professional influencer. Her life was one big curated feed, a constant stream of perfect moments. Bryce, her fiancé, stood beside her, arm possessively around her waist. He was 29, slicked back hair, wearing that confident posture of someone who'd just discovered their first winning stock. He had that "I'm somebody now" swagger, but I wasn't fooled. I couldn't help but feel that pang of isolation, that feeling that I had never quite fit in with them. My success had always been quiet, built in server rooms, late nights in boardrooms, and not splashed across Instagram while they were living their social media lives. I was out there securing venture capital. I couldn't help but feel like I didn't belong in this world of glossy perfection. And then Aunt Susan called out, "Amelia, you're so quiet over there. Come talk to Bryce. He's in your line of work." I felt a dozen pairs of eyes turn toward me, all probably brimming with that familiar story, the story of poor Amelia, the failed tech exec who couldn't even get past security at Bryce's dream job. I plastered on that smile and stood, walking over to where Bryce and Chloe were. I reached out my hand. "Bryce, right, congratulations on the engagement," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't shake my hand. Instead, he lifted his beer in a lazy toast, scanning me from head to toe. "Thanks, Amelia. You're Chloe's cousin, the tech one, right?" He didn't even bother to hide the condescension. "Something like that," I said, keeping it light. He smirked, and then, with the tone of a man who thought he knew everything, said, "Tough market out there." Huh. Heard the bubble finally burst for a lot of those smaller firms. Brutal. It can be, I agreed, my voice neutral. At that point, Chloe chimed in, her voice all bubbly and proud. "Bryce is doing amazingly. He's a senior data analyst at his firm." Senior, huh, I thought. "That's great," I said, genuinely. "A rising tide lifts all boats." "Yeah, well, I'm not planning on staying there," Bryce continued, puffing out his chest. "I'm aiming higher, much higher." He leaned in, clearly enjoying the spotlight, like he had some grand secret to share. "I'm in the final round of interviews at Nexus Core Analytics." My heart skipped a beat. Nexus Core. That was my company, the one whose letterhead was sitting in a box in my home office, with my name at the top. I managed to keep my voice light as I said, "Oh, really, Nexus Core? I've heard of them. Elite firm." "Elite doesn't even begin to cover it," Bryce scoffed. "They're impenetrable. They only take the absolute best. They're handling analytics for, well, I probably can't even say NDAs. You know." I nodded slowly. Yeah, I knew all about the NDAs. I had drafted half of them myself. "It's been a grueling process," Bryce continued, clearly enjoying the moment. 6 rounds of interviews, psychological profiling, practical exams. Most people wash out before they even get a phone screen. But you know, he shrugged. "They like what they see." "I'm sure they do," I said, my mind already racing. My calendar for Monday morning had final interview Bryce Keller's data analyst candidate written clearly at 9 a.m. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They saw me as a failure, a cast-off, but I knew better. This was my world, information was everything, and I wasn't going to let Bryce's arrogance go unchecked. So I raised my club soda and said, "Good luck. I hope it works out for you." "Thanks," he said, already turning back to his adoring audience. "But I don't really need luck. When you've got the talent, you make your own." I just smiled and faded back into the shadows, the plan already taking shape in my mind. What they didn't know was that they had forgotten one crucial thing: who I was, what I had built, and what I was capable of. And I was about to remind them. The dinner had a strange rhythm to it, like a performance I wasn't invited to, but I was stuck playing the role anyway. The conversation swirled around me, and I could feel my family's eyes flicking to me now and then, probably wondering why I wasn't engaging more, why I wasn't joining in on the celebration the way they expected me to. I wasn't sure why I felt so disconnected. It wasn't just exhaustion, it was something deeper, something colder that had settled in ever since Aunt Susan's comment about my job situation. My job situation? God, what a condescending way to put it. Bryce was holding court by the fireplace, leaning back in his chair with the smugness of someone who thought they had already won. His arm was possessively around Chloe's waist, like a man who had just discovered that success wasn't just something you earned, it was something you claimed. Every time he laughed, he did it with that artificial ease that people put on when they're trying to convince others they belong in a world that doesn't quite fit them. I knew that look all too well. I'd worn it myself in the early days. But the thing about Bryce was that he wasn't really faking it. He had no idea how much of a fraud he was. Chloe was practically glowing, her fingers constantly flashing her new diamond ring in front of everyone's Her smile was wide and scripted, like a commercial for something perfect too perfect. "Can you believe it, Amelia?" she said, the same line she'd repeated every 5 minutes for the past half hour. "Bryce is so incredible. You know, he's got this huge career ahead of him. I mean, he's been working so hard, and now everything is falling into place." She beamed at him, as if he were some sort of mythical creature. I couldn't help but watch them both. I tried not to let my frustration show on my face. This was my family. And yet, for the first time, I felt like an outsider. A small part of me wanted to join in the celebration, to smile, to be happy for Chloe. But another part of me, well, that part felt like it was slowly dying inside. Then there was Bryce, the self-proclaimed rising star, always ready to point out how much better he was than everyone else. I didn't even need to hear him speak. His posture, the way he wore his arrogance like an expensive cologne, gave it all away. Every time he opened his mouth, it was a little reminder that he saw himself as untouchable. At one point, he turned to me with that same condescending smile, as if he were waiting for some validation. "So, Amelia," he said, his voice dripping with fake sincerity, "I hear the tech world's been a little rough lately. You know, all those small companies. They didn't quite make it through the bubble burst. I'm sure that's been hard on people like you." He leaned in, like we were sharing some kind of secret. His gaze flicked over me, sizing me up, as if trying to figure out where I fit in his carefully constructed version of the world. I could feel my pulse quicken. His words were a little too loaded, a little too pointed. It was like he was testing me. Or maybe, just maybe, he was trying to remind me of something, of my place, the one where I wasn't in control, where I wasn't the one calling the shots. And the more he spoke, the more I realized that was exactly what he thought. I cleared my throat, keeping my voice as even as possible. "It can be tough out there," I said. "It's not just the bubble burst, though. It's about knowing where you're going and making sure you're prepared for the road ahead." I forced myself to smile, "But I'm sure you already know all about that." Bryce didn't seem to notice the undercurrent of tension in my voice. He just laughed, loud and unashamed. "Oh, absolutely," he said. "I'm planning on taking things to the next level. You know I've got my eye on something big. Real big." He smirked at Chloe, who giggled in response, as if this were some inside joke that I wasn't in on. "Actually," he continued, "I'm in the final round of interviews at Nexus Core Analytics." My brain froze. "Nexus Core," I repeated, just to make sure I had heard him correctly. He nodded, that smug grin of his never faltering. The room felt like it was closing in around me. My breath caught in my throat, but I did my best not to show it. I kept my face neutral, my posture controlled, even though inside, my mind was racing. Nexus Score Analytics, the company I had just become CEO of, the company where I had spent months of my life fighting, negotiating, and sacrificing everything. And here was Bryce, this guy with a smirk on his face, casually mentioning it like it was just another step on his path to greatness. I tried to keep my voice light, but it felt like I was speaking through a fog. "Oh, really? Nexus Score, I've heard of them. Elite firm." I couldn't even say the words without the weight of them bearing down on me. What were the odds that I would be sitting here across the table from the man who thought he could just walk into my company and take a job? He was about to get the shock of his life. Elite doesn't even begin to cover it. Bryce scoffed, clearly enjoying himself. He leaned back in his chair, throwing an arm casually around Chloe's shoulders as if he owned the entire room. "They're impenetrable. Only the absolute best make it in. You know, they're handling analytics for some top-tier clients. Probably can't even say most of them, NDAs and all that." He was proud of himself, too proud. I nodded slowly, letting him talk, even though every word he spoke felt like a jab. I could feel the tension growing between us. It was like he was baiting me, trying to provoke a reaction to see if he could get me to slip. But the truth was, I wasn't worried about him. He was about to face a reality that was going to shatter the persona he had so carefully built, and I would be the one to deliver it. "It's been a grueling process," he continued, clearly reveling in his own story. 6 rounds of interviews, psychological profiling, a practical exam. Most people wash out before they even get to the phone screen. But, you know, he shrugged as if it were no big deal. "They like what they see. The audacity, the sheer arrogance. It was like I was watching a man convince himself that his own hype was truth. And the more he went on, the clearer it became. He thought he had it all figured out, thought he was destined for this position, the one I had worked so hard for. He had no idea." "When's your final interview?" I asked, trying to keep the amusement out of my voice. "Monday," he said, his smile widening. 9 o'clock sharp. They're flying in the new executive team just to meet me. I felt my heart stop. 9 a.m. That was when my meeting was scheduled, the one where I, Amelia Thorne, would officially step into my role as CEO. The new executive team. My team was ready to meet me, and Bryce thought he was the one they were flying in to meet. How cute. I almost couldn't help the smirk that tugged at the corner of my lips, but I kept it under control. This wasn't the time. Not yet. "Apparently they are," I said. "Are they?" I let my words hang in the air for a moment, letting him feel the slight doubt, the uncertainty. It was subtle, but I was sure he'd catch it. And the funny part, he would have no idea how close he was to stepping into my world. The world that had been built with late nights, meetings that stretched into the early hours of the morning, and sacrifices no one had seen. But in his mind, he was the one on top. He thought he was the shark. "Well, good luck," I said, raising my club soda. "I hope it works out for you." "Thanks," he said, already turning back to his audience. but I don't really need luck. When you've got talent, you make your own." The words hung in the air, but I didn't let them touch me. Instead, I faded back into the background, my mind already shifting gears. Bryce Kellers had no idea what was coming. He had no idea that the game he thought he was playing, this little game of corporate one-upmanship, was about to come to an abrupt end. He thought he was the one with all the power, but the truth was, he was just a pawn in my world. And Monday morning, he was about to learn that the hard way. I sat there, the echo of Bryce's words still hanging in the air. The dinner had taken a strange turn, but the real work, well, that was just beginning. I could feel the tension in my bones as I stared at the empty chair where he'd been sitting. The ridiculous confidence, the boastful tone. I had no doubt he thought he was untouchable, like a man who couldn't be questioned. Someone destined for success without really earning it. But I knew better. I was used to this world, the one where appearances didn't matter, where all that mattered was what you could prove. So I got to work. I walked into my home office, the room bathed in the quiet glow of my computer screens, the familiar hum of the machines, the whir of the air conditioning. It was soothing in a way, like the calm before a storm. The office was my sanctuary, the place where I made the decisions that had shaped my life and career. And now, it was the place where I'd uncover the truth about Bryce Kellers. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through the texts from Aunt Susan and Chloe. They'd already painted their version of events. They were busy throwing pity my way, while Bryce was busy constructing his lies. But that wasn't my concern right now. No. Right now, I had to focus on something else the resume Bryce had so proudly displayed, the one that had gotten him into Nexus Corps' final round of interviews. I knew enough to see the cracks. A man who had lied about everything, the school he went to, the companies he worked for, the expertise he supposedly had. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about family drama. It was about protecting the integrity of the company I had just inherited. I couldn't let someone like him sneak in, not on my watch. I opened the document containing his resume and scanned through it again. On paper, it looked impressive, too impressive. Graduated with honors, a senior data analyst title at his last company, experience with proprietary analytics models that were still cutting edge. But the more I looked at it, the more it felt like someone had been trying too hard to create a perfect picture. And the pieces of that picture, they didn't add up. The first red flag came when I read about his expertise in analytics models that were still in development, models I knew my teams were still learning, models that weren't even public yet. I ran my fingers over the keys, pulling up the files from my own team, the ones where we were still in the early stages of testing and training with these new models. There was no way that a mid-level analyst at a competitor would have that kind of expertise. No way. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence fill the room. This wasn't just a hunch anymore. There was something off about this whole situation. Something I could feel deep in my gut. I had seen it before when people with too much ambition and not enough skill tried to make their mark. They lied. They faked it until they couldn't anymore. And it seemed like Bryce was about to be caught in the act. I opened another window on my computer, pulling up the internal candidate database. I had access to everything: background checks, employment verification, even criminal records if I needed them. I typed in his name and hit enter, waiting for the results to load. My heart raced, but my mind was calm. This was the part of the job that I excelled at: digging, uncovering, seeing past the polished surfaces people put up. This was where I could shine. The database buzzed to life, and the first thing that popped up was his previous job at Trans Global Data. It was listed as his most recent position, where he had supposedly excelled. But when I dug deeper into his employment history, something strange jumped out at me. The dates didn't match up. There was a 6-month gap in his resume that he had neatly covered by extending the dates of his other 2 jobs. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I cross-referenced the information with internal HR records. It was a small discrepancy, but it was a crack in the facade. And cracks like that, they always got bigger. I made a mental note to dig further into that gap, but something else caught my eye: the addendum on his termination. He hadn't just left Transglobal for a better opportunity, like he claimed. No, the truth was much darker. He'd been separated by mutual agreement, a phrase I knew all too well. It was corporate speak for fired under threat of legal action. I clicked on the link, running a full background check on his departure. Sure enough, there was a legal settlement attached to it. The company had agreed to keep quiet in exchange for Bryce signing a non-disclosure agreement. That meant whatever had happened wasn't just a minor issue. No, it was something big enough to result in a legal settlement. I felt a thrill of cold satisfaction. This was what I did. I found the truth when others couldn't. I wasn't some passive bystander in my own company. I was the one who called the shots, the one who made sure everything was above board. Bryce Kellers was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Next, I pulled up his university credentials. On paper, he had graduated with honors. But when I cross-checked the information, something didn't sit right. His degree in business administration wasn't even in the field he claimed. He had implied he was an expert in data analytics, but his degree didn't match the expertise he claimed to have. I pulled up his transcripts, and sure enough, there were gaps in his academic history as well. He had taken a few certification courses, but none of them were complete. He hadn't passed the final exams for the advanced courses he claimed to have mastered. The more I looked, the more I realized that Bryce's entire professional life was a house of cards, and I was about to knock it down. I couldn't help but feel a rush of power as I sat there, clicking through the documents. This was the part of the job I loved: solving the puzzles, uncovering the lies, putting it all together. And Bryce, he was a lie waiting to be exposed. His resume was nothing but a carefully constructed story. And now I had the proof to back it up. He thought he was walking into an interview with the new executive team. What he didn't know was that I was the one he'd have to face, and I wasn't going to let him get away with this. But the fun part, the best part, I wasn't just going to fire him. No. That would be too easy. I wanted to make sure Bryce understood exactly who he was messing with. I had a plan that would make him regret ever thinking he could bluff his way into my company. I spent the next hour pulling together all the evidence: his fake credentials, the discrepancies in his employment history, the legal settlement, the incomplete certifications. I compiled it all into a file, a neat little package of undeniable proof that Bryce Kellers was a fraud. And just to make sure I had everything in order, I called my COO, David, and my head of HR, Maria. They needed to be prepared. This wasn't just going to be a normal interview. This was going to be an audit. And Bryce, he was going to have to explain every lie he'd told. When everything was ready, I sat back in my chair, a sense of calm washing over me. I had everything I needed. I had the power. And when Monday morning came, I was going to make sure Bryce Kellers understood exactly what happened when you tried to lie your way into the top. The plan was set, and I was ready. But as I closed the file on my computer, I couldn't help but think about the family dinner again, the way Bryce had smirked at me, the way Aunt Susan had pitied me, the way Chloe had gushed over him like he was the greatest thing to happen to her. This wasn't just about business. It wasn't just about proving Bryce wrong. It was about showing them all that I was in control, that I had made it, that the woman they thought was a failure was now the one calling the shots. And when it was all over, when Bryce was exposed for the fraud, they'd see it. They'd finally understand. I wasn't just Amelia. I was the CEO of Nexus Core Analytics. and no one was going to take that from me. Monday morning arrived in a blur, like I was moving through the motions, but my mind was already miles ahead, calculating every move. I could feel the tension in my stomach as I walked into the conference room. The silence was thick, the kind of silence that only comes before something big happens. The clock on the wall read 8:55 a.m., and I wasn't the least bit surprised. I like to be early, especially for moments like these, moments when power would shift, when everything would change. Across the table, David and Maria sat opposite me, waiting. They knew what was coming, even though they didn't know exactly how I was going to handle it. We all knew the stakes. Bryce Kellers, the man who thought he could walk into this room with his arrogance and lies, was about to face the truth. The door opened at precisely 9 a.m. I heard the unmistakable sound of heels clicking on the floor, followed by the sound of a confident voice booming from the hallway. Bryce Kellers, dressed to the nines in a suit that probably cost more than most people's rent, walked into the room with a self-assured smile plastered across his face. I could see it already, the cocky swagger, the overinflated sense of self-worth. He had no idea what he was walking into. "Good morning," he boomed, his voice so loud I almost rolled my eyes. He extended his hand toward me, a predatory grin stretching across his face. "Bryce Kellers, a real pleasure to meet the new team." I didn't stand. I wasn't going to play the game he thought we were still in. I knew what he expected: polite pleasantries, some small talk to warm up the room. But today, there was no room for that. Not with him. "Mr. Kellers," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm, not an ounce of emotion betraying my control. "Please, have a seat." I gestured toward the empty chair at the end of the table. His smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. He hesitated, looking around at the room, clearly puzzled. He probably thought this was just going to be a friendly chat with the new executive team. He couldn't have been more wrong. He was about to face the full force of everything I had been working toward. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the one in control, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. He stumbled into the chair, and I could feel the heat of his gaze, but he had no idea what was about to hit him. The games he'd been playing in front of my family, those were over. "Let's get started," I said, opening the file I'd been reviewing all weekend. His resume was sitting there in front of me, a joke, a collection of lies and half-truths. The first thing I pointed out, his supposed mastery of the Delta Prime analytics model, a model that was developed in-house by our team, one that had not been released to the public. "You claim to have expertise in the Delta Prime model," I began, keeping my tone even, neutral. "As you know, we developed that in-house. It's not public knowledge." His face froze. His smile didn't just fade, it collapsed. The color drained from his face so quickly that I was momentarily worried he might pass out. The smug arrogance he had been riding on for so long began to evaporate, and I could see it in his eyes. Panic? He hadn't prepared for this. He thought he was invincible, and I was about to prove him wrong. I read the white papers. He stammered, tugging at his collar nervously. "I'm a fast learner." I cut him off, keeping my voice sharp, my eyes never leaving his. "The white papers are sealed under top tier ND as Mr. Kellers. They haven't even been released to our partners. So I'll ask you again, how did you learn it?" He fumbled for words, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape, but there was no way out. "It was a different model," he muttered, his voice cracking. "Similar to Delta Prime? I must have confused the names." I raised an eyebrow, letting the silence hang between us. He was falling apart right before my eyes, and I wasn't going to let him talk his way out of this. The lies he'd woven, they were all starting to unravel. "I see," I said, my voice cold. "Let's move on to your practical exam. Then, I see you used a recursive algorithm to solve the logistics optimization problem. An interesting choice. I pushed the document across the table toward him. But it's highly inefficient. It would crash our servers in under a minute. Why did you choose it over a standard iterative solution? He stared at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. His eyes were wide, searching for something to latch onto, anything to keep his facade intact. I thought it was more elegant, more disruptive. Disruptive, I repeated. Leaning forward just a fraction, it's not disruptive. Mr. Kellers, it's just wrong. I let that sink in. It's the kind of flashy, incorrect answer someone gives when they don't understand the fundamentals of data scaling. His face twisted, his pride bruised, but still trying to hold on to his composure. I thought, he started to say, but his voice trailed off. Let's move on, I said, cutting him off. Tell me about your previous employer. Transglobal Data, according to your resume, you left for a better opportunity. But when we looked into your history, we found a discrepancy. The room was deadly silent now. His back straightened, but the nervous energy was palpable. He was sweating, his confident posture starting to crack. He didn't know how deep I dug. He had no idea just how much I knew. I was traveling, he stammered, his voice growing high-pitched. I was finding myself. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a near whisper. According to our background check, Mr. Kellers, you weren't just on a sabbatical, you were fired. And not only were you fired, but you signed a legal settlement with your previous employer. You had falsified your credentials to get the job in the first place. His face twisted into a grimace, his jaw tightening. You can't prove that. This is harassment. This isn't an interview, I'm afraid it is, I replied, my voice icy. And you failed. You are a fraud. Mr. Kellers, you lied about your education. You lied about your work history. You lied about your expertise. You're not fresh blood. You're a liability. And now you have the gall to walk into my company and try to lie your way into a job. The room was silent, all eyes on Bryce. His arrogance had disappeared entirely. What was left was a terrified, cornered man struggling to keep up with the web of lies he had spun for so long. His face had gone pale, and his hands were shaking. I could see it now, the mask slipping, revealing the pathetic little man underneath. He wasn't a powerful executive. He was a fraud. Get out, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The interview is over. Maria will validate your parking. Do not list this company on your resume. Do not contact anyone here again. If you do, our legal team will be in touch. He stood there, his eyes pleading, but I didn't flinch. This was it, the moment of truth. He had been caught, and he knew it. His empire of lies was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Without another word, he grabbed his briefcase and ran out of the room. The door clicked shut behind him, and I allowed myself a brief, satisfied breath. It was over. David let out a low whistle, his face breaking into a grin. Well, I guess that's a no on the hire. I leaned back in my chair, the tension leaving my shoulders. I felt no triumph, though it was just relief. Relief that the truth was finally out, that I had taken control of the situation. Relief that I had protected my company from someone like Bryce Kellers. But as I looked around the room, I knew this wasn't just about business. It wasn't just about exposing a fraud. This was about power, about who controlled the narrative. And today, I had won. Maria and David were already going through the motions, flagging his file, blacklisting him from future opportunities at Nexus Core. But I wasn't focused on that. I was thinking about what came next, the fallout, my family. They'd never see me the same way again. And honestly, I didn't care. This was about more than just protecting my company. It was about reclaiming my place in the world. and I was ready to move on, ready for whatever came next. But first, there was the small matter of my family to deal with, and that, I knew, was going to be the real test. The aftermath of the interview was almost immediate. As I sat back in my chair, the weight of what had just happened settled in. I had taken control. I had exposed Bryce for the fraud he was, but it didn't feel as triumphant as I thought it would. I wasn't celebrating his downfall. I was just tired. My phone buzzed almost instantly. A flood of texts pouring in from Chloe. Her name lit up the screen. One message after another, each one more frantic than the last. The words were almost identical to the ones she'd sent during the dinner. "What did you do?" she asked. Then, "Bryce just came home, and he's a mess." Another one came in. "He says you humiliated him, set him up." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I took a deep breath and went back to my work, letting the messages pile up. I knew it was coming. The storm of anger and accusations. I knew how this story would be rewritten in their minds, how they would twist it into something that fit their narrative. It was inevitable. Bryce had already painted himself as the victim. He had to. That's what these types of people did. He had to make me the villain to maintain his fragile ego. But I wasn't going to be dragged into their emotional circus. A few hours later, I was home, my thoughts still racing. The last thing I expected was for Chloe to show up on my doorstep, standing there with a small bag in hand. Her eyes were red from crying, and the look on her face, it wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't the defensiveness she'd been clinging to at dinner. No, this was different. This was all real emotion. "Amelia," she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "can I stay here?" I didn't say anything right away. I just stepped aside and I opened the door, letting her in. I didn't know what to say, how to handle this, but the last thing I wanted was for her to go back to Bryce. Not now, not after everything she had just found out. She didn't need to be around that kind of poison any longer. For the first couple of days, she didn't talk much. She kept to herself, hiding away in the guest room most of the time, and when she did come downstairs, it was only for the tea I made her. I could feel the weight of the silence between us, the years of distance we hadn't dealt with, but I couldn't push her. I couldn't make her talk before she was ready. On the third day, I came home to find her standing in the kitchen, staring down at a pot of water that had long since boiled dry. Her hands were shaking as she tried to salvage the situation, but it was clear she was struggling. "Hey," I said, leaning against the counter. "You okay?" She didn't turn around at first. When she finally did, her face was blotchy, her eyes filled with regret. She opened her mouth to hike, then closed it. "Finally," she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Amelia." "For what?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. There was a part of me that wanted to say, "For what you said at the dinner," but I knew that wasn't what she was apologizing for. She wasn't sorry for defending Bryce. She was sorry for what she had been blind to all along. "I was so awful," she continued, her voice breaking. I wanted to believe him. You know, he was so convincing. He told me he was doing everything for us. For me." I stayed quiet, letting her words sink in. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I had let that go when I'd walked out of that conference room and shut the door on Bryce. No, what hurt the most wasn't what she had said. It was what she had believed. But I understood. I had been that naive once, too. "He admitted it," she said, her voice barely audible. "After you left, he admitted everything. The fake resume, the getting fired, all of it. And you know what? He wasn't even sorry. He was just mad that you caught him, mad that you had power." I could see the change in her face then, the moment when the walls she had built up around herself began to crack. But there was more she needed to face, more truths she had to come to terms with. This wasn't just about Bryce anymore. It was about her, too. Aunt Susan's furious with you, by the way, Chloe added, wiping away a tear. She says you humiliated the family. I felt a sharp pang in my chest, but I didn't let it show. Aunt Susan's fury didn't bother me. Not anymore. The thing was, Aunt Susan had always been blind to what really mattered. She had never seen me for who I was, only for what I wasn't in her eyes. That's why she had so easily accepted Bryce's version of events. It was easier for her to believe that I was the problem than to face the truth that Bryce had been a fraud all along. I know, I said, a small smile tugging at the corner of my lips. And it's fine. She's entitled to her anger. I guess it's easier for her to be angry with me than it is to face the truth. Chloe seemed to take that in, and for the first time since she walked through my door, she really looked at me. The look in her eyes shifted from confusion to something else, something softer, something I hadn't seen in a long time. "You're the only one who actually told the truth," Chloe said, her voice thick with emotion. "You were the only one who protected me, even after I was so horrible to you." I took a deep breath, the weight of her words sinking in. There was so much I wanted to say, so many things I hadn't been able to tell her. But in that moment, the words didn't matter as much. What mattered was that she was finally seeing things clearly, finally understanding what I had been trying to tell her all along. "We're family," I said softly, walking over to her. "And that's complicated, but we're still family." She shook her head, her tears now flowing freely. "No, it's not complicated," she said, her voice trembling. "It's not. I was stupid. You were always right. I don't know what I was thinking, but can you forgive me?" I stood there for a moment, looking at my cousin, the same girl who used to get on my nerves with her constant need for approval, the one who had always seemed so distant. But now, she was just Chloe again, my little cousin, and I realized I had already forgiven her. I had to. This wasn't about the mistakes she had made. This was about us finding our way back to each other. "I already have," I said, my voice steady, though there was a warmth in my chest that hadn't been there before. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly seeing her. And in that moment, I realized I was seeing myself more clearly too. Chloe stayed with me for 3 weeks. We talked, really talked. It wasn't just about Bryce or the lies he had told. It was about our lives, our choices, the things we had never said to each other. I told her about the merger, the pressure I had been under, the exhaustion I was still trying to shake off. She opened up about her insecurities, her fear of never being enough, of never living up to the perfect life she had created for herself online. It was hard, but it was real. And that was something neither of us had had in a long time. Eventually, Chloe went back to her apartment. She was quieter now, more thoughtful, but something had changed. She had changed. She was channeling her energy into something real, something that mattered. And as for me, I had finally found the peace I had been searching for, not in my family's validation, but in my own truth. The truth that had always been there, waiting for me to finally claim it. In the end, I found the peace I had been searching for, not from my family's approval, not from their pity or their misunderstanding, but from my own truth. I had finally stopped trying to fit into their narrative, the one they had written for me, and started living by my own rules. It wasn't about proving anything to them anymore. It was about me, about reclaiming my life, my worth, and my power. I had built something incredible, and no one, not even family, could take that from me. Chloe was starting a new chapter too. She was taking her talents and focusing them on something real, something that had meaning. And as for me, Well, I had my company, my peace, and the strength to face whatever came next. The family dynamics had shifted, but I was okay with that. It was time to move forward. So, here's to the truth, to the power of standing firm in who you are. Even when others try to bring you down, it's not always easy, but it's always worth it. Thanks for sticking with me through this journey. If you've enjoyed the story, make sure to hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. And remember, never let anyone define you.